Eccoci, buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Siamo arrivati all'ultimo giorno degli EV Pro Days 2021. Oggi iniziamo con una lecture dedicata al rapporto tra musei e videogiochi. In realtà poi la giornata continuerà nel pomeriggio con un'intervista in Chiridion. Si parlerà in quel caso di teatro e videogiochi per poi concludersi alle 17 con un incontro dedicato, un video, un omaggio all'Italia videoludica. I'm switching into English now because we have an English guest, so I need to improve my English. First of all, I need to improve my English, but I think my English is enough to introduce our guest. Good morning, Kristian, and good morning.
Hello, good morning.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. So first of all, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really interested in listening to your experience and your museum experience with video games. I think it's important to share different perspectives on how video games could be used inside cultural institution. And before giving you the floor, I'm going to introduce you and I'm going to read your biography just to avoid any mistake and to give a brief preview of your talk. You are going to describe the development of the V&A's 2018 exhibition, Video Games Design, Play, Disrupt, but your talk will also open up the history and the wider context of the V&A's relationship with video games culture. So I'm reading your biography now. Kristian Volsing is a curator of contemporary design and popular culture, working at the Victoria and Albert Museum since 2007. Is currently part of a team forming Young V&A in East London, a museum to excite children and young people about the possibilities of design in all its forms. He has previously contributed to the V&A's Rapid Response Collecting Project, co-curated the groundbreaking 2018 exhibition Video Games Design, Play, Disrupt, and the Museum 2020 Global Collecting Project and Display, All Will Be Well, Children's Rainbows from the Pandemic. So I'll give you the floor and thank you again. And okay, it's your turn now.
Brilliant. Yes, I just want to say thanks also for inviting me. It's really brilliant to be able to join you from my living room here in Hackney in London. I'm here today to introduce the video games exhibition that was held at the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2018 to 2019, and also in V&A Dundee in Scotland, that was co-curated by myself and Marie Fulston. And it's just an image of the entrance that you can see here. But just in case you're not aware of the history of the Victoria and Albert Museum, it's a museum that's over 150 years old. It's one of the first and foremost collections of design and manufacture in the world. This is an image of the building here in London. There's over 7 miles of galleries within and over 2.3 million objects in the collection. And it's a real focus on industrial design and manufacturing craft with collections of ceramics, sculpture, metalwork, painting, furniture, fashion, and textiles. So to be exploring video games in this institution was quite a challenge and a new prospect at the time. But it's certainly something that the museum is very engaged with. There's a definite desire to engage with contemporary digital design, and video games are definitely at the forefront of this industry. It makes over $2 billion a year. This image here is of League of Legends championships held in the Bird's Nest Olympic Stadium in China. So there was already, several 100,000 people at the stadium, and then another 46 million people watched it online during the tournament. So it's such a massive, important industry to explore. There's a history of museums engaging with video games around the world. Famously, the Game On exhibition that was produced by the Barbican here in London, which opened in 2002 and has pretty much been touring ever since, being updated for different cities and countries where it's been displayed again. But so that was from 2002. In 2012, the Smithsonian in America did an art of video games exhibition where they asked members of the public to decide what games should be shown. And Acme in Australia did an exhibition called Games Masters, which was really about kind of authorship theory of video games designers and exploring particular designers' works. But all of these exhibitions tended to have a very strong focus on being able to play video games in the museum. And our notion as the curators was that there's an inherent issue with this with presentation in exhibitions. There's a lack of time and an inclination by visitors to play the games necessarily. They might pick it up and play it for a few seconds, but then you don't really get an insight into a 40-hour game. Or even a 1-hour game. You're playing in public with the game halfway through. It's not ideal. There's definitely a visitor interest in the context and process behind the design of video games. It's not just seeing the final product, as with so many design objects. And of course, there was a curatorial desire on our behalf to expose the inner working and amazing production work that goes into making these games. And it was also very much a decision on our behalf to focus on a contemporary period, highlighting a moment where ideas have changed in video games. So looking at around the mid-2000s, where the rise of social media, smartphones, and different ways of engaging with video games really changes the landscape of how video games are discussed and played. These previous exhibitions really looked at the history of video games, and we were very certain that we wanted to focus on the contemporary period. So here is a couple of images from works that were featured in the exhibition, and this just really goes to show how we're trying to broaden the idea of what video games are and the inspiration for games coming from unexpected places. So this is on the right is an image from Cardboard Computer's Kentucky Route Zero, a kind of point-and-click adventure game. That was one of the games that we explored in detail in the design section. And on the left is Magritte's LeBlanc Sing. And there's a definite correlation between the design of the video game and the optical illusions they were aiming for and this painting. And we actually managed to borrow this painting from the National Gallery of Art in Washington. And so we managed to display these two together, which was really one of my favorite points in the exhibition. And so I'm just going to play a little clip from the director of the New York University Game Center, Frank Lantz, who really inspired a lot of the thinking behind how we approach video games and gave this talk's title.
Making games combines everything that's hard about building a bridge and everything that's hard about composing an opera. Games are basically operas made out of bridges.
So yeah, his quote is, "Making games combines everything that's hard about building a bridge and everything that's hard about composing an opera. Games are operas made out of bridges." So games are combining objective truth of science and engineering and the subjective truth of art. And it's not a split between logic, goals, and instrumental play and the emotional, explorational, experiential, improvisational play. But it's a combination of these things, and thinking and doing is to games what looking is to paintings and what listening is to music. And these are things we do in everyday life, consciously and unconsciously. And games are the aesthetic form of thinking and doing. So you can indulge yourselves in taking part in games, but decoupled from actual action. And it's also very much about thinking about how games, this talk was very much about thinking about how games can find ways of resonating with the rest of the world, not just an art form in its own bubble. And this is something that we really wanted to explore and try and get across to audiences of this exhibition. And it just so happened also that in the recent past, we also at the V&A managed to have exhibitions about engineering and opera. So it felt very appropriate. So the original research for the exhibition, which, as I said, opened in 2018, we really began researching in 2014, 2015. So it was quite a long process. This research period, when it ramped up, certainly took place in us visiting studios around the world, over Europe, in America and in Japan, attending events and getting in touch with games designers, doing things like mapping ideas through development of stories and using post-it notes and mood boards, creating narrative flow charts is actually a lot of stuff that video game developers also use in their own narrative building. So it feels like a real kind of they run alongside each other very nicely. And we also held a series of public events and Friday Lates, so Parallel Worlds Conference, which brought in games designers with designers from other industries together to talk with each other. And Friday Lates, which are events where the museum is open late on the last Friday of every month, and you can and brings in a completely different audience through having designers do talks and demonstrations and playful events. And yeah, so it was a really it was a really interesting period to kind of figure out what it was that we wanted to showcase. And also, this is just a slide showing how difficult it was to curate this show, because there is so much work that goes into the background of producing a game. This is just a few drawings that were shown to us by Matt Nava, who was the designer for the characters and worlds of the game Journey, which featured in our exhibition. And it's kind of deciding how to create a story for our visitors, but also reduce it down to its bare bones. So it was a very interesting process. And I just left this in, but because I think it was an interesting way of us trying to explore how we would engage our visitors with the context of a game without them necessarily being able to play it. So trying to find out the core aspects of what made a particular game interesting and pulling out those elements and trying to figure out what objects we've got access to that could showcase this particular story that we wanted to get across. So it was a lot of in-depth kind of exploring with designers and our interpretation teams. And this is an image from the first gallery when you came into the exhibition, which was called New Designers. And it showcased 8 games in detail. All surrounded, each one was focused around a installation at first, and then there was a kind of narrative story built from different elements of the production process. So we tended to choose a specific element of the game design, be that the environment or the narrative or character design, and explore that per game. And so, yeah, here is just a little clip from the game Journey, in case you're not aware of it. It's a game from 2012. It's a very zen game in which you traverse a desert to reach a distant mountain. And on the way, you come into contact with distant players online, but you can't have direct communication with them. But it's more about leading each other through this environment. And yeah, so here is how we showcased some of the work from Journey. So in every example that we wanted to look at, we wanted to explore the kind of studio culture and showcase that through imagery, and try and get some of the narratives across about the way that they developed their stories. And here also are images of some of the early artworks produced by Matt Nava, as I showed earlier. So this is the first painting of the white light of the mountain. So trying to develop that through many different artworks before they came to the final design. and also some hand-drawn character sketches. So Matt was trying to figure out what the player character would appear like as it traversed through the landscape. But we also wanted to really highlight the technical aspects of the game. So obviously showcasing artworks is quite simple, but actually we wanted to showcase some of the digital design elements that go into producing a game. And this, what I'm showing, this video clip here is from an early prototype that they made of the game, testing out a gameplay design, which was to encourage cooperative play. So these circles represent players, and when they get closer to each other, they give each other a boost and they move slightly faster. So that's what is happening in this video. And that turned into eventually a kind of gameplay that becomes so beautiful from this really kind of sparse design to start with. And then, so from Journey, which was a small team producing a game independently, this we went to a really large scale team. This is upwards of 200 people working on this game. This is Naughty Dog's masterwork, The Last of Us from 2013. And it's kind of akin to playing inside of a Hollywood blockbuster. This game particularly is about survival through a pandemic. So it seems kind of appropriate right now, but luckily not as violent. But yes, so and then, you know, the studio culture from Naughty Dog represented through imagery. As you can see, they shared with us a very staged image of what they wanted their studio, of how they wanted their studio to be represented, and also some of the amazing behind the scenes works that went into building narratives around the game. So this in the middle is a noteboard that was in Naughty Dog Studio. It's a breakdown of lots of different elements that go into building up the entire story. And yeah, so we had this shipped over from Los Angeles, only we didn't have the whole board shipped over. They took lots of detailed photographs, took all the post-it notes and note cards off and stored them very carefully, sent them to the UK, and then our conservation team recreated this from the original post-it notes in our gallery, because it would have been very expensive to ship a cork board to the UK. So it was very interesting working with our conservation team on this. And then also we wanted to showcase the kind of amazing acting work that went into this. So and actually how the actors appear in the game through mocap. So we've got Ellie, we've showcased Ellie's motion capture suit in the gallery and some of the footage from the filming. And yeah, we couldn't do a exhibition about video games without featuring one of the world's most prominent studios, Nintendo. And what we also wanted to do was make sure that, because this section was about new designers, that we showcased a new IP from the team. Rather than focusing on something like Mario, we chose to work with Splatoon, where they created a game that was their version of a first-person shooter, or a third-person shooter, but actually they've created a kind of fun paintball aesthetic, and it's really different from a lot of their more well-known works. And so yeah, again, we got to showcase some of the amazing artworks that the artists created in the Nintendo studio. This stuff's never been seen before, and also you know, focused on the idea that this was a new kind of game for Nintendo. It's a bit more edgy, a bit more urban, and really different. So you can see that in the concept designs for one of the underpass levels and the game levels. And then this is a short clip from the game Graveyards. This is really like two independent designers, artists based in Belgium, and the entirety of this game from 2008 was about playing as an old woman walking through a graveyard and sitting down and reminiscing, and that is the entire gameplay. And it was a real departure for so many game players in 2008 who were so used to action and fast movement, and actually it it was very surprising for a lot of our visitors too, because it's still a underground game. And this is an image of the Tale of Tales team, and we also presented their game alongside their real-time art manifesto. So this was them talking in 2008 at an event in Athens, and making a presentation about how you can move games away from being goal-orientated to something more about exploring things that are happening in the real world. So that's just a little insight into the design gallery and some of the games we explored in detail, and the breadth of games that we explored. The next clip I'm going to show you is from a large-scale film that was in our second gallery, and I will let Robert Yang speak for himself. So let's go.
A lot of my favorite video games are about shooting people in the face, and then their body like flops to the floor. And you know, those are fun games that I enjoy playing. But I think if you want to bring video games forward as some kind of important, vital cultural medium that's relevant to everyone, pursuing a life of violence is not a relevant pursuit for many people around the world. So I think if we want video games to reflect culture and reflect the depth and wide breadth of all human experience, we need games that are also about dark candlelit dinners. We also need games that are about holding someone's hand. We need games that are about giving a hug, but not too long of a hug. That would be weird, but not too brief of a hug either. And all these things are so deep and compelling, and I feel like sometimes I want to scream because there's so much of life that we're not capturing in video games yet, and I just want to try to do that. And it's so hard sometimes because just the language we have in video games, the existing technology we have in video games, always the grain of that. Wood has a grain when you're working with it, and so does video game code. Video game code also kind of has a grain when you're working with it, and that grain usually tends towards arcs towards violence. And I wish we could change that, and I'm trying to in my own way.
So that was the amazing Robert Yang, who featured in a film in our gallery Disruptors that really looked at people that are changing video games today and exploring different and unexpected ideas in video games, from politics to exploring violence in video games to sexuality. It was a series of desks with quotes and reports, and some interactions with short gameplay or different kinds of games that you could play in the space. So so here's a couple of images from some of the games that were in the space. So one of them was Phone Story, which is a game that you play on an app on your phone, and it was banned from the App Store because the gameplay involves you exploring how the materials in your phone, where they come from being mined in the Congo to the manufacture of it in China, where in Foxconn's warehouses, people were committing suicide. And so it's a really complex story to explore through what is essentially a kind of gameplay that you would expect to see that you're very expectant of, but it is exploring different subject matters. Or on the right is Nina Freeman's How Do You Do It, which was a short game produced for a game jam, and she wanted to explore sexuality in this, and one of her memories was of playing with dolls and pretending to make them have sex, and that is what she produced a game about. And it's such an unexpected narrative to explore through gameplay. And yes, here's an image of the film installation where we had some amazing speakers from games world, from designers, from commentators and academics, exploring how things are changing in video games over the last 10 years. And the final section of the video games exhibition explored the player's role in how video games are shared and created and played, basically. And this is a large-scale installation looking at how, internet and gaming culture and how players share their creations or take part in mass performance. So this is an image where we looked at fan art in Overwatch, which is such a huge moment at the time, to people watching League of Legends in huge stadia and online, to playing together online in massive battles in spaces such as EVE Online, and creating all sorts of amazing things in Minecraft. I'm just going to show you a 2-minute clip from this film. So this is the element that explored the way that people play in Minecraft. So I'll just put that on.
Building a new world for you guys so you guys can see me start from scratch. So it'll be kind of like our little world.
Let's go get some wood and then we're gonna go kill some animals for food. And we're gonna make a little tiny house. Oh my god, it's a creeper! Stay back, 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 no!
Why are we walking under this tree? Is that a good idea?
Wow, you can see all of it from here.
Hi there, everybody. This is Halcoon, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how I really don't play Minecraft like other people. This is a 1-to-1 scale model of the Starship Enterprise. I just got finished putting the framework together. I haven't slept yet, so I'm going to be a little loopy as I show you what I got here. So you can see there's some scaffolding still up there. So, well, take a walk, shall we?
Minecraft, yeah.
Why are we saving the world? We're saving the world by falling a whole bunch.
Look, we have to do stuff. So you're on the yellow block.
Yeah.
You're going to drop. Oh, I'm going to drop as well.
Oh my god. Oh my god!
Oh, that was amazing.
That was horrible, wasn't it? Was that horrible?
So you got the diamond. Yay!
This is incredible. Like I've seen a few ideas in Minecraft, and this one has to be the most detailed one yet.
Yeah, this is my Redstone computer version 4.0. I put a lot of work into this GPU. Now, this GPU design, this is not my design, but I did modify this.
I'm sorry, you did what now?
I created Pac-Man inside of Minecraft. So these are all of the guts that are driving everything. It was more a learning experience in how to make Minecraft do what you want it to do.
So yeah, it was a real interesting experience trying to gather all of those Minecraft YouTube contact details to ask for permission to showcase all of those clips in the exhibition space. But on a massive scale, it was really brilliant and overwhelming experience. But yes, as shown here, so some of the other elements that we looked at were exploring the League of Legends Worlds Final from 2017, and also fan art created by fans of Overwatch that have been shared online, from makeup tutorials to cosplay to any number of artworks. And yeah, showcasing all of this players' work in the museum as a response to video games, or how players engage with video games, I think was really groundbreaking and a really interesting element of the exhibition that I carried over to my future projects. And then the second half of the players offline, was really looking at the kind of growing culture of grassroots events, bringing games to unexpected places through festivals and events. And this is where the co-curator on this project, this was her background. She used to run these kind of game events in unusual places, where they would showcase the work of up-and-coming designers of short, different kinds of games that use unusual controllers. So what you can see at the top in the foreground here is a game where you play as a caterpillar munching apples. But to play that, you have to put your head in the tent and get into those like sleeping bag style things, and the screen was sitting in the upper part of the tent. So to move your caterpillar around on the screen, you would roll around in one of these bags, kind of like a caterpillar. So it was really this kind of like highlighting the work of independent producers and DIY culture and DIY controllers as a mode of playing video games. And yes, so we showcased some of these. We created these special video game cabs for specific games that you could play as kind of multiplayer and play in different ways, and get artists to design the artwork for the cabinets. And yes, and then there was a series of events bringing offline culture to the V&A, as I mentioned before, and as part of the Friday Lates, and also this Parallel World series of talks and conferences, bringing designers from the world of video games into conversation with designers from other industries, from architecture, from theme park design, all sorts of different places. And it was 3 years of bringing days of video games culture to the V&A, and it was it was a really amazing series. So since then, I have moved on to a role in a project as part of a team redeveloping the V&A's sibling museum, the V&A Museum of Childhood in East London. This is a museum that had been built in 1870 from the original ironwork of the original building of the V&A in East London, to bring culture to East London, and it became renowned in terms of engaging children with the museum collections. And in the 1970s, it changed its focus to become the National Museum of Childhood. It has always been kind of underdeveloped. It has a situation where the collections were mainly focused on toys, and the way that objects were showcased in the museum was in glass cases, lots and lots of objects behind glass with short texts that children didn't really engage with. It has a very big active audience, but they didn't really necessarily engage with the collection so much as per like coming to play in the sandpit or coming for story time. So I've been part of a team redeveloping this into Young V&A, which is a new museum that's really about engaging children and young people up to the age of 14 with design and getting them to explore design as a medium and showcasing alongside that children's creativity. And this is a render of what it will hopefully appear like when, at the moment, we're closed for the redevelopment, and we will be reopening in 2023. And I'm wanting to talk about this because this will be this will house the UK's first permanent gallery dedicated to game design, which I'm curating, and it's very exciting to be able to talk about this. So the V&A's has been engaging with collecting video games for a long time, but in a really kind of haphazard way, and mostly based in the Museum of Childhood collection. So video games and computers as part of childhood history. So the focus previously has been very much about a social history of children, of childhood. And so when games, consoles, and computers have been donated, they've been put on display in this kind of manner, where it's just as a kind of physical object behind glass. And as we move away from being a social history of childhood to a museum about engaging children with design, obviously exploring game design is really inherent to that. So when we open in 2023, the games gallery will be about the kind of the why and the how of games. And so we're still in a research period at the moment, but we are developing a complex narrative for this space, which will showcase the massive breadth of historic board games and video games in the museum's collections, and complement that with exploration of game design from contemporary designers. And within these massive displays, which will be we'll be exploring genre and getting children to engage with the idea of mechanics in board games and video games, and learning about those elements of design. Looking more closely at specific games and from the designer's point of view and from the player's point of view, and this idea of the why and the how. So it's like, why do you want, what's the story that you want to get across through creating a video game? What's the experience that you want people to have, and the how is, of course, like, how does this happen technically? How do you how do you use different game development environments, from more complex things such as Unity to simple tools such as Bitsy that you can engage with online and create your own games. So so this is going to be it's quite a challenge for us to develop this at the moment. Still showcasing the huge historic collections that are in the V&A's collections, but bringing them to life through animating cases, through distinctive insight into the design process. And we'll be combining tabletop, card, and video games here to provide insight for young audiences into the design process, and also looking at the inspirations and the cultural significance of games and really highlighting that. And here is the most recent render of how this gallery will appear in the new museum, and I'm very excited to see this. But we're still in development, as I mentioned. But the idea of the gallery is that you will learn about genre and mechanics. You will learn about narrative and aesthetics. You will learn about the player's role in making games, be that through creating narratives in games like Dungeons and Dragons, or creating your own games, as I mentioned, in tools like Bitsy. And you'll bring all of this together through an exciting installation that at the moment in the front of this gallery just looks like a table of board games. But we're working with games designers to make an installation here that will incorporate all of these elements and make an interactive space for our young visitors to try and create their own game design from everything that they've learned through this gallery. So it's ambitious, and I'm very excited to see how this plays out. But and I just want to say, so I hope this was an interesting insight into the way that myself and Marie Falston produced the video games exhibition, and a bit of a insight into the future of Young V&A in East London. And I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me to talk at the EV Pro Games.
Okay, here I am again. Okay, let's put the banner on the screen like this. Perfect. We have some questions from the public, so I'm going to put them on screen. The first one is not a question; it's more a comment. Matteo said that Tale of Tales are based in Italy now. So
right. Yes. Sorry. Yes. When we worked on the show, they were in Belgium in 2017.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so a question, this one. Nicola, are you planning to have more team-specific exhibitions? For example, a collection of British team games or even Italian?
I would love that. So I think, the focus at the moment is this permanent gallery on games. And within that, we have we're showcasing a global reach of video games, but within that also local and British as well. So the two main video games that we have in the first round, which will, over the course of time, be changing, are Monument Valley, who are based in South London, actually, us two games, and independent designers who made a really amazing game called Knights and Bikes, who used to work for... oh my gosh, I've totally forgotten the name. But the people that made Little Big Planet, Media Molecule. So they used to work for Media Molecule, and then they've left and made their own independent game, and it's very kind of inspired by that, but their own experiences. So we have a kind of British theme in these permanent galleries. Long term, I would absolutely love to do another video games exhibition. One note that, from our point of view, is that it's very expensive to do. So I think it might be a while before the V&A embarks on doing another one, unfortunately. And unfortunately, also, another point to make was that this exhibition would have had a global tour and would have had an update for different countries where it toured. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and cut back all the touring ambitions, unfortunately. So, but yes. Sorry, long answer to that question.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Another question is one. Do you focus on some issues digital games may have as cultural artifacts? Have you ever designed an exposition, for example, based on violence in digital games or on the representation of women in digital games?
Yeah, that's quite a few questions right there. So so the focus on digital games as cultural artifacts, that's certainly something that is a research project that's happening in the V&A. One of my colleagues in another department is looking at the long-term preservation of digital design, and video games is certainly part of that. So that's another team's focus, but it's definitely happening in the V&A. And the idea about an exhibition based on issues of video games, well, I mean, that is something that we definitely explored in that middle section of the video games exhibition. We did look at the representation of women, of sexuality, of racism, of of politics and violence, and the way that certain games are exploring those issues, and not just focusing. So it's difficult because you wouldn't want the focus to be critical necessarily of a game that you're showing in the exhibition. Our way of doing that was to explore the work of artists and designers who, through their work, are critiquing these issues. And I think it's really important that that kind of those ideas continue to be represented in museums. So it's certainly something that I think about in all my work.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from a guy you certainly knows, Luca Roncella from the National Museum of Science. But this question is very long, so I think it's going to cover our faces for a while, so don't worry. Sure. Yes, it's covering our face, but that's not a problem. As well as bridges and symphonic works have a value and meaning in themselves, but are completely only when they are experienced by people. Don't you think that even a video game exhibition should consider not only the artistic and engineering value of the work, but also the way players play and interact? A video game itself is an empty cathedral, but it only makes sense when played. What do you think about showcasing videos, for example, of players playing and interacting with each other?
Yeah, I think it's a really brilliant question, and it's definitely something that I have that we tried to address a little bit in the video games exhibition itself. It's obviously these games aren't complete until somebody's playing them, and it's really important to showcase that and to get that knowledge across, and also the different ways in which people play games. It's not just one straight way of doing it. People are so creative about the way they play games. We were really interested in some ways in showcasing like speed running and the different ways that people can do that through engaging with glitches in games, and there's all these amazing stories about how people have managed to finish games within 30 seconds and stuff like that. And also showcasing the way that people play games together. So that's very interesting. Like one of the games that we featured was Miyazaki's Bloodborne, which is renowned for being a very complex game to play. And we wanted to explore the players' engagement with that. And so we had somebody who does a lot of YouTube videos we created an installation around him playing that game and his thoughts and feelings about it, and also recording his hand movements so that you could see the complex series of moves that were just kind of ingrained in his fingers as he was playing this game to beat this massive boss. I think is really, really important, and I think it's a really good point to make that actually, yeah, exactly, the games aren't anything until the players are there, and so showcasing their engagement with games is really important, definitely.
I have a question for you. Have you ever thought of creating a video game about the museum? So there's a lot of people talking about these different kind of video games. So video games based on museums, history, or collections. So there are two different ways to put museums in connection with video games. Have you ever thought of creating something interactive about the museum? I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's initial, like, so there's definitely been engagements from the public with creating video games around the V&A. There's definitely some Minecraft builds of the V&A, so that's one way of doing it. There, internally we kind of we for the video games exhibition had we had some funding to produce some video games, and we were talking about those kind of ideas, but actually what it turned out was that actually it was kind of, we wanted to show a kind of global scope, and instead we wanted to help some game developers develop their own independent games, so we didn't want to focus on the V&A in that sense. One of my colleagues, so I mentioned it before, but I'm featuring this game tool called Bitsy, which is an online development tool in our new galleries. It's really simple, it's really accessible. You can make very simple graphical adventures very quickly. And one of my colleagues has already made a game about exploring the stores at the museum. So I think, but as a wider subject matter, I don't think I know of anyone, of any big games companies that have like made something around the V&A, but I think it would be fascinating engagement.
Thank you. I think there are no more questions, so I want to thank you for your experience, for sharing your experience with us today, and because I think it's interesting to hear to different museums worldwide working with museums from different perspectives, from different point of view. So thank you very much, Kristian, for your lecture. And I'm going to switch into Italian for a while. Ci vediamo nel pomeriggio per chi volesse seguire l'intervista a Inchiridium e l'evento finale delle 17. Quindi tutti i link li trovate nel nostro sito. Thank you again, Kristian, and arrivederci. A presto.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.